So sorry. I had to stop that video. So I'm in my car. I'm just going to finish the last little bit. Manjiro moved his eyes from the bottom to the top of the rigging. Always men were up there with buckets and brushes. Others were replacing or repairing something that had to do with the sails and sheets. When they lifted their eyes from their work, they looked for something out there in the water. On each of the three masts, a man stood high above the deck, not working at all. Those men did nothing but search the waves with a long instrument held up with one eye. So it would have been like a telescope. Manjiro guessed, that what the sailors searched for had something to do with the enormous brick structure between the fore and the main mast. Each of the two iron pots in the brick housing was big enough to cook a grandfather sea turtle. Often men were down inside them scouring until they shone like silver. By the end of the second week, he understood that the men were searching for something called whales. The purpose of the brick structure with its pots is to cook whales, he told his friends. That is what the sailors with sharp eyes are looking for. How do you know this? Fudenojo asked. You cannot understand their language. They speak with their hands and faces just as we do, Manjiro said. They often say whales, and when they are on deck and say whales, they are apt to glance at the pots. And what is whales? I think it is their word for Kujira, Manjiro said, which is the whale that he had seen that day. Fudenojo scowled. All on board ship could not eat even one before it spoiled. Manjiro sighed. What Fudenojo said was true, which meant that his careful observations had evidently led him to a wrong conclusion. Not being able to understand their rescuers' language was very trying. With the passing days, Manjiro's admiration for the sailors increased. The drinking water supply was short, and water was strictly rationed. That was why he and his friends had been given only a half cup of water the day they were rescued. These men perspire a great deal, he said to Goman, but they do not complain that they do not have enough water. While he considered chopsticks preferable and superior to knives and forks, he soon learned to use the sailors' eating utensils. He and his friends were now served portions of different foods on one plate instead of small portions with long intervals between servings. They still didn't know why they had been served the way they were when they were first rescued. Manjiro could understand some of what the sailors said, but he couldn't speak enough words in their language to ask such questions. A boy named Billy was helping him to learn new words. Billy was taller and huskier than Goman, but he had told Manjiro he was 15. Manjiro's age, same age as Manjiro, 15. Billy's eyes were blue, but he in no way resembled the image of a barbarian that Manjiro had held from the old wise man's stories about them. Billy's hair was the color of new straw sandals, and his ears were like small wings. Brown spots of different shapes and sizes dotted his face. Manjiro had observed all that when Billy first came to him, tapped his own chest and said, Billy. Manjiro tapped his chest. Manjiro. Billy indicated the flag with red and white stripes and stars in the corner and brought his hand back to his chest. American. Remembering Fudenojo's instructions, Manjiro just said, Toza. Billy had shaken his head and said words Manjiro knew meant that Billy had never heard of his country. He didn't tell Billy that he had never heard of his homeland either. That would not be polite. The name of the ship was the John Howland. Manjiro had no trouble with John, but Howland came out Howrand. Nor could he say Honolulu, Billy's favorite place away from home, the way Billy said it. It came out Honolulu, no matter how hard he tried. There simply was no L sound in his language. With words, signs, and drawings, Billy explained that the huge brick structure with its iron pots was used to cook the oil out of whales. Manjiro smiled to himself when Billy drew a picture of a whale. He had been right when he had told Fudenojo and the others he thought whales was their rescuer's word for Kujiro. Whaling was a big business for America and other countries, Billy told Manjiro. The oil was used for lamps and candles and to make machines operate efficiently. There were already many barrels of oil in the hold, Billy said. Jesse Roston, who made the barrels on board the ship, was called a cooper. With signs and facial expressions to go with the words, Billy told Manjiro that one-of-a-kind whale, the sperm whale, had something in its intestines called ambergris. It's used to make real expensive perfume. We sight a sperm whale, you'll know by the cheering and how scared we are. They can be mean. When they returned to America and sold the oil and ambergris, Billy explained, all on board would share in the profits. Some of the men were teaching Manjiro how to climb the rigging. It was not as easy as it looked. The higher one went, the more pronounced the ship's roll became. It was exciting, though, and he didn't understand why his friends preferred to stand around on the forecastle deck in each other's company. Perhaps, he thought as he stood on a swaying yard, he would see a big school of whales, as he had that day when he and his Tosa friends were on the rock island. Captain Whitfield would be pleased with him if he did. Okay, and that's the end of chapter 7 that I couldn't finish before.